Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ladies, gentlemen, gamers, and fellow Amazon subscribers. Welcome back. So, I recently saw the Fallout series on Amazon Prime Video, and we're here to talk about it. So, originally, to kind of give a little history and context here, I obviously am a gamer, as I say in all the start of my videos. And I have played the Fallout series before. Now, granted, I have not played Fallout too much. So when I at first heard there was a show adaptation of Fallout, I was already kind of skeptical because we've had show and movie adaptations before for stuff. And pre Arcane from League of Legends, most of them were really fucking ass. Like usually when anything gaming related came out, you could kind of expect it to be not that good. You could kind of expect it to be hot dookie most of the time. And sadly, this is because people take the source material and they try and adjust it for normies and they try and adjust it for non gamers. So, a little bit of information about me and Fallout. I know Fallout decently well. I grew up in the 360 era. I grew up when Fallout was booming. Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. These were very well known words to my ears. A lot of my friends played. Now, granted, I was poor when I grew up, so I didn't really have time or money to really play these games, but I really wanted to. I thought it was interesting. Now, I didn't know what Bethesda was. I didn't know they also made Skyrim. I didn't know all these things until way later on when I grew up. However, I did eventually end up falling into the Fallout series with Fallout 4, and I played a good bit of it. Now, I have a little bit of a curse on me where I just never finish a Fallout game all the way through, because number one, Bethesda games kind of feel like shit, and number two, they're really fucking long. However, that's not to say I don't like Fallout. I really do like Fallout. I think the story is amazing. I think the gameplay is pretty cool. But overall, it's just the whole world that I really, really like. It really gets carried to me by the story. The whole idea of America basically going into a nuclear war with the world, or I guess everyone going into a nuclear war with each other, and everything fucking exploding, and then what happens after is really, really cool. And it's very fantasy like too. It's not as grounded in reality as you would think. It's realistic, but to an extent. So, this is where the Fallout show comes in. I did hear about the Fallout show a little bit here and there. However, again, because it's a video game adaptation, I never thought much of it. I sort of was just like, oh yeah, I think that came out. Oh yeah, I've heard of it, whatever. And then slowly but surely, people started talking about it. And this was people around me. And I will give a little anecdotal story here as to like how this ended up happening. So obviously my friends were talking about it. Some of my friends were recommending it. They were like, "Oh yeah, it's really good. It's really nice." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And sadly, this happens a lot where people will recommend me something and I won't really listen. But it got to the point where I went to the doctor's office for an appointment. And as I was there at the front desk, the guy saw my Discord shirt because you know I have to be repping that I'm a gamer. And the guy basically said, like, "Oh, yeah, what are you into?" And I started telling him this, and that. We talked about games. And then he mentioned the Fallout show. And I'm like, "Oh, wow." Like, he asked me, "Did you watch it?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I thought it was going to be asked because it's a video game adaptation." But him, along with everyone else, basically said the opposite. They said, "Nah, bro, it's good." So I was like, okay, I'm kind of interested now. So I got the gang together, I got the Scooby gang together, and I watched it. And we watched it over like the span of, I think, 5, 6 days. And the guy at the doctor's office even said it was so good he binged it, and he hasn't binged the show in like 3 years. And I was like, oh my God. And that guy's a full ass working man, full time. I'm like, damn. So basically, I ended up watching it. Now, obviously, we're going to go into very light spoilers, as always, but I'm not going to spoil too much. But essentially, Fallout, the Amazon show, and I know it's going to be a little hard to organize ourselves here because I might mention the other Fallouts, but I'll try and mention them all by name. But if I just say Fallout in general, I'm probably talking about the show. But the Fallout show basically is its own story. I was confused if it was going to go into the games, if it was going to be its own retelling, if they're going to take the core content and butcher it like they do for everything else. And safe to say that, just at its core, after completing it right now, I'd like to say, obviously, there's some gripes I have with the show, very little, but the show was amazing. The show was actually really good. And one of the main things that actually got me interested in the show was two things. Well, number one, the main actress, one of the main characters for the show, Ella Purnell, is the voice of Jinx from Arcane, the other hit video game adaptation. So already we're off to a great start. Although this one is live action, it's not just voice acting. So I was like, okay, I wonder how she's gonna do. And number two, this takes place, canonically speaking, after all of the vaults, after all of the games thus far. It takes place the most in the future, and I'm like, okay, wow, that's pretty interesting. The biggest thing I would like to say about Fallout, the show, the Amazon show, that I really did enjoy was that aside from the great acting, the great visuals, the great everything, and they like to do little teases too to stuff that they couldn't fit all in the show. There's definitely stuff that, we know from Fallout that I don't want to spoil because I don't want to say whether it's in the show or not, but there's a lot of factions and a lot of other stuff that's in the show. Sorry, that's in the games that's not in the show. But the one thing I do want to praise the show for is they do a lot of flashbacks and current day events where you're almost getting a mix. Now, the sad part is it's with one character, but the great part is this character and just everything in the show in general connects very, very well to each other. It almost gets to the point where it connects too well, where that's almost a pain point, where it's like things are almost too connected, where it seems too coincidental. But I felt like it was done well enough where I'm like, wow, even though we're only seeing the past flashbacks from one character from like, the time before the nukes dropped, it really connects everything together very well. And there's a lot of points in the story where you're not going to feel that, but by the end, most, if not all of it, is going to make complete sense. And I'm talking the bare ass end too. Like, it's kind of like when the teacher says, hold your questions for the end of the presentation. You really got to do that for fall because there's things, right? If you look out, you'll pick up on in the story that won't really make sense. You'll be like, wait, how is this person here if they're there? How is this person doing this thing? How is this thing happening right now if this is what happened, right? It defies a lot of common logic if you pay attention, but it's something where they tell and they don't, or they show and they don't tell, right? It's something where a show doesn't hold your hand, doesn't baby you. It presents it there, and if you're smart, you'll pick up like, hey, this isn't making sense. But the ending really ties everything together very well, and they do this through a mix through the whole show of doing flashbacks and current day events, current day meaning after the nukes. So I really, really appreciated that. Now, another thing I want to say that I really liked was the characters in the show. There's three main characters. There's Lucy, who's, Ella Purnell, the voice of Jinx. There's Maximus, and there's the Ghoul. And like I said before, things connect together in this show very, very well, even with all the flashbacks to like pre-nuke time. This is where these three characters, these three titular characters, end up crossing paths and end up doing things that eventually, even if they split up, they'll run back into each other. Where you would think in this big, wide, not so blue anymore world, how could this happen, right? It's like the saying, "Oh, it's a small world." It really is, because sometimes it feels like, and this goes again into somewhat of a pain point, where it's like, how do they meet up, get together and help each other this often and this like well? It's almost like, wow, you could almost tell it's a story. The suspension of disbelief almost breaks, but you hold on to it just because it's fall. It's already kind of goofy enough. But that's the thing about these three main characters. They are so good. They are so varied. They're so rich. And one thing that the story kind of presents to us really early on. Remember I said, telling and or sorry, showing and not telling. This is where they do tell sometimes. They do give hints out for, I guess, the plebeians that are watching the show. But one of the things the show does is it tells you, like, are you going to change? Are these characters going to change? Lucy is a vault dweller, and basically the main story is she's trying to find her father, who was basically kidnapped. Maximus is a Brotherhood of Steel initiate who's trying to work his way through the ranks and trying to live his life. And the Ghoul is basically just a bounty hunter, and there's a lot more to his story and all the other people's story, but I'm trying to keep it spoiler free here. But the Ghoul has his own stuff going on, and he's trying to get this bounty to try and accomplish a goal he has. And the best thing about this is the story is told from all three characters' perspectives. It switches between them at different times. There's a lot of times, like I said, where they do meet up, they do coalesce and sort of converge in one central time. But the main thing is, they are different characters, and they go through a lot of changes throughout the story. And even if they don't go through changes, for one of them specifically, and I'll just say it out right here, the Ghoul specifically, you see a lot of flashbacks with him before the bombs dropped and how he was as a person. And seeing like just that change alone, because he doesn't change too much in the actual show in current day time. The other two characters definitely do change, Maximus and Lucy. But the Ghoul himself doesn't really change. But the biggest change that occurred from him was from him being a human to him being a ghoul. And just seeing his change there and the other two characters change throughout the story was absolutely excellent. I think the writing for this show and how characters do things and how the world affects them and each other affecting them as well, especially when they meet up and do things together, I think it was absolutely beautifully done. These three main characters, well acted, well written, knocked it out the fucking park. And Ella Purnell is fucking beautiful. But either way, another thing I want to point out is it's not only the three main characters that are good. There are other characters in the show, and the show is made by Amazon. So they got the pockets, and we definitely saw it because there's so many actors in this show that I was like, wait a minute. These are famous people. These are people I know from other stuff. I don't know exactly where, but there's literally a point where, like, one of the characters goes into a supermarket and they meet these two people running the supermarket, which is not a good supermarket, by the way. It's very evil. But they're running the supermarket. I'm like, wait, I know these two from other pieces of media. I don't remember their names, but they're two lazy fuckheads where in every piece of media they just look lazy and like they look like weed smokers. They look like potheads that are just high all the time. And it's like these people are running it, they're lazy shit. I'm like, wait, I know these people. And there's a lot of times in the show where there's a lot of like famous high profile people that I'm like, oh my god, like I know them from somewhere else. They have fucking Linus from Lost in here. And I'm like, what the flying fuck? There's a big star-studded cast. And the best thing is, even though the show is definitely carried by the three main characters, all the other side characters are really, really good too. Like just seeing them interact in the world of Fallout and seeing like crazy people, seeing charlatans, seeing people who are like somewhat sane but just got fucked by the world. It's really, really nice. And a lot of the side characters are really funny and memorable. Thaddeus, one of Maximus's friends, is actually really funny. And I really do hope they show us more characters like him in the future and just go over more stories like that. One of the biggest complaints I will always have about a good show is that they don't show us more. Now, showing us more might lead to exhaustive writing and, the people getting burnt out trying to make good. You can't have too much of a good thing, or else it might not be good anymore. But it really is a tragedy that this show wasn't longer. It's 8 episodes an hour each, but it was just so fucking good, especially with the side characters. I wanted to see more of them, and they keep popping up. The whole story feels very cohesive because, again, not only do the characters coalesce and come together, they sort of meet up very often, and they're going to meet up again. They keep meeting up eventually, they're always going to intersect. But even the side characters come back, and it's so funny to see them. It's so good. Now, another big, great glazing thing I have to say is the fact that if you've played the games, you will very deeply enjoy the show. And that's the best thing. You don't need to play the games to know and watch the show and have it be enjoyable. But playing the games and knowing the lore expands the show a lot more. There's certain people you will see in the show that you will know from the games where you're like, oh my god, I know them. You're like, oh my god, why are they here? Especially the ending. My good lord, what an ending this was, because they set up stuff for a season 2, of course, and the ending for season 1 was pretty good too. It obviously left on a great cliffhanger, but the season 1 stuff that they show at the end was like, wow, I can't wait to see this. I can't believe this is here. And wow, this, these things are from the game. And I'm just like shocked, and I'm trying really hard to avoid spoilers. But it was really, really good overall. I think like just showing the wasteland, they show a lot of stuff from the game. They have the Pip-Boy there. Everything they take seems to be from the core story, from like the core material, and they don't disrespect it. They literally just bring it in and use it as a tool to tell their own story with it. And it's so good. They didn't cannibalize anything. They didn't morph anything into their own thing. They didn't change anything too crazy to fit their own narrative. It was just they took the story and lore of Fallout and they made a new story with it. It almost could have been a game. It's so fucking good. And again, the only pain point I really do have is that things just seem too coincidental at times, where again, the characters would meet up very conveniently at certain times. But aside from that, I don't really have any complaints about this show. There's just so much good in it. Like there really is. I just wish it was longer and the coincidences were a little less on the nose and obvious. But again, the show does a great job of showing and not telling most of the time. The characters are great, the story is great, the fighting scenes are pretty good too, the action scenes are good. There was some goofy moments, but it's meant to be goofy and lighthearted sometimes. It's also meant to be, a little gritty. And another thing that they do a lot is they show the gore, and I'm like, oh my dear god. Like they did not pull punches. This is a very adult show. But again, it's a show for adults, obviously. Kids are probably going to watch it too, let's be real. But it's a show where you don't need to play Fallout to experience it. If you do, it's even better, and it's a great show overall. I fucking loved it, and I barely have any complaints about it. I would honestly rate this show, and I was looking forward to watching it every day. If I didn't watch it that day, I would get upset. So, with all of that in mind and barely any negatives, I am confidently placing this show at a 9.5 out of 10. It's really hard to get a perfect score for me, but this is damn near it. I would definitely rate this show a 9.5 out of 10. Maybe a 9, but I really want to raise it to 9.5 because I honestly can't think of any bad stuff. There was no really slow parts in the story. And again, the characters are so varied and they're so different from one another. Lucy is very like happy go lucky, do good. Maximus is sort of ambiguous, although leaning towards I kind of hated him. And the ghoul is more tragic, where it's like I really want to like him, but he really tries his hardest not to make you like him, but you end up feeling bad for him because of what you see with him. It's just so fucking good. It's really really good. And I can't wait for season 2. I don't know how they're going to keep this up, but if they do, it's going to be great. But anyway, 9.5 atom bombs out of 10. I hope everyone enjoyed. And if you want to see more from me, catch me live at twitch.tv/Tecnics channel. Hope everyone enjoyed, and please tell me anything you think in the comments below. Eee!